Here we go. Live in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Daddy Chats Live. And Aidan didn't laugh at the intro this time. The last two times he's heard the intro, he found it hilarious.
I'm getting better. I'm
But
getting better.
as you probably already know who he is. But to introduce Aidan, who are
Here
you
we
and what do
go.
you do?
Live.
3, 2,
Some people call me the
1.
Space Cowboy. Some call me the Gangster of Love. Some people call me Maurice. No, I'm Aidan Mattis. I'm the host of a channel called The Lore Lodge. We talk about history, folklore, religion, all that fun stuff. The general line between the known and the unknown.
The blurred bit where it's like this is
Yeah.
kind of feasible, but we've got to give you the proper sciencey answers.
Anytime that there's something where it's like, this has a few mundane possible explanations, but it could also be something wild.
Yeah, that's what I know. I think I took that sort of idea whenever I do like my mythology videos, like my Anfilath Moore and most of them, even the Morrigan. I'm like, I'm not gonna say no. I'm gonna let you do your ideas. Half the time, I'm gonna be real. Most of the time, I do believe what I'm saying. But I pose like, do I? Don't I? The only one I have been open about that I believe is a real thing was the Gilly Do. And
What does the
obviously
Gilly do again?
the Gilly Do's was like this little like forest fae or she because it's Scottish, who was plodding around. So the story is that a young girl goes into the forest, she gets lost, she cries, and she meets the Gilly Do, who's like a little blue guy who's like wearing a load of leaves, which is where we get the ghillie suit from. According to Scottish legend, is how we get the ghillie suit. So what happened after that was she ran back, and then the landowner of I can't remember the exact details of the story, but the landowner went to hunt the Gilly Do, and they went in back into the forest, couldn't find him. Gilly Do was never seen again because obviously at this point everyone's very superstitious. A fae or a she of any kind is a bad omen, even though this particular one did help a little girl. And my current belief is that that it probably was just a hermit. The way it sounds, it just sounds like a hermit. I'd like
Yeah.
the actual, like the really in-depth stories where like the Gilly Do goes to the kingdom of the She is actually really interesting and my favourite. But if you're looking at a logical answer, I do believe the Gilly Do existed in some capacity, whether that's more mythological or more realistic is. But speaking of more realistic sides of the stories, with Missing 411, obviously the main focus on this is our two sides of the coin, where I believe it's more of an extraterrestrial phenomenon, you believe it's maybe more supernatural. The regular cases, how do you separate? Because a lot of your videos are trying to dispel some of the misinformation. Trying to think of the correct wording for that. The misinformation around Missing 411, where people tend to hype up stuff that isn't really there. So how do you balance that out with the more realistic cases?
Sure. So at first, I did not do a great job of discerning between the cases that really did seem odd and the ones that maybe certain people had not been the most honest that they could have been in reporting them.
Hmm.
And then there was, I can't remember the exact case, but I remember that the Tom Messick case was one where we ran into some information that made us go, hmm. And then there were a
Yeah.
couple of others. And what I started to realize is, all right, if instead of starting with the story as David Paulides has told it,
Yeah.
if we completely ignore everything he discovered, all the research he did, and we reinvestigated ourselves, that gives us a much better picture of whether or not this is mysterious.
Hmm.
And a lot of them on their face simply are not once you go through and look at that stuff. I I mean, I'd say probably 8 or 9 out of 10 times that we've looked at a missing 411 case, it has a logical explanation. And then a lot of the times there will be a logical explanation where it's possible, but it doesn't seem likely. And that's when you start to look at, all right, well, is there anything else that seems equally unlikely? That might be a possibility that you start to look into. Some cases, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head.
The one with the young boy intrigued me, where they found him like peeking off of the cliff face and then he's pulled back.
Oh, that was Alfred Bielhart's.
That was a
Yeah.
really intriguing case to me because it reminded me. For
Mhm.
some reason, my brain went to like my. I don't know why. I was always watching video. I was like, oh, it sounds like he was taken by a pterodactyl, but I think that's just my childhood of watching
Mhm.
Jurassic Park. But like most of the times when you deliver a more supernatural explanation, I tend to lean towards. I mean, this is my wild man leaning. Is like I tend to lean towards stuff like Bigfoot. I must
Yeah.
admit.
Yeah, that's definitely when it comes to the more supernatural seeming stuff. I think maybe the term supernatural is not the best one. Maybe preternatural would be more
Yeah.
appropriate. Preternatural meaning things that science has yet to explain. That it's not magic. It's we just haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah, it's stuff like the
So
platypus.
yeah,
Basically, yeah.
uh, the platypus. Yeah, of course. Um, whew.
I knew I was going to
Oh
crack you up
boy.
at least once on this stream.
Yeah. Oh my god. Okay. What was I talking about?
Bigfoot being preternatural. That was it.
Right, yeah. So because the Bigfoot that everybody sees in media is the basically the guy in the gorilla suit, the gimlet film.
Yes.
That's not Bigfoot as it goes traditionally, historically.
Mm.
Bigfoot going back to the Coast Salish folklore that he actually originates in, the Saskets, is another tribe, another group of strange Indians is the terminology that's used sometimes.
Mm.
Or they're not quite Indians; they're something else. They're like us, but they're not us. There's a variety of things there, but it's never that they're necessarily. I shouldn't say never, but they're typically not magical so much as they're different. They're humanoid but not human. So it sounds a lot more to me like another group of hominids than it does some sort of interdimensional creature, you know?
Yeah, oh, yeah, no. Whenever I see like that's a really weird common occurrence. Like, because I'm really into the ape man. As you know, you've seen the list of mythology I want to cover, and it's like 90% ape men and lizard men. Like, and like it's like even with the what's the Australian one? Oh, it's gone out my head.
Yowie?
That's the one, the Yowie. For some reason, I was thinking of it with a cow. I was trying to call it a cowie, and I was like, that's not what it's called. But the Yowie,
You're thinking
everyone seems to
of
either believe, which, like, even as much of a UFO person as I am, even I think is stupid. We're like, oh yeah, no, the Yowie or the Bigfoot or the Yeti comes down in the UFO, and I've seen it teleport, and I'm like, you haven't though, have you? You
also, like,
haven't, no.
I feel like chances are if you did see that, it probably was not Bigfoot. Like,
Yeah, I would actually.
just because Bigfoot and UFOs may exist does not mean that they must be connected.
I would actually put it more to imagine some like poor like Sasquatch is in the middle of the forest, like he's been abducted by aliens, and not only is he just been abducted by aliens, he's now got a bunch of people laughing, going, "He's teleporting."
Mhm.
Oh, what is actually
Oh,
as a small sidetrack? What do you feel of like? Because I used to watch a lot of the Bigfoot hunting shows, and I feel like there's one recently that just feels like a soap opera, like a Duck Dynasty type thing, and I think it invalidates so much.
so I have been behind the curtain now. I have seen behind the veil. I
Welcome to production industry.
yeah, a lot
TV and
of
film.
the investigative TV shows about ghosts or cryptids or lost Templar gold on Oak Island, for example. Um, I won't say it's 100% fake, but here's what I've come to understand. Anytime they make one of these shows, they have to make sure it's interesting,
Yeah, something has to happen.
which means that entire season is scripted ahead of time. Whether it's scripted on an episode to episode basis or whether it's scripted as the entire season, there is a script. There is stuff that they are going to find There is stuff that is going to happen, whether it's real or not. And then if something real does happen, awesome. Did we get it on film? And I'm not saying that's universal, but I have heard from too many people who have worked on the productions. I have spoken to too many people in the film industry. Unfortunately, I think that most of the TV shows you're seeing are probably more about telling you a fun story than they are about telling you the truth. But the nice thing is that that leaves a gap in the market for people to go and actually do the investigative work and
Mm.
actually research these things and try and understand them rather than, you know, just going for profit. If there's a TV studio involved who is insisting on making money, then you're going to be less likely to get real answers. Whereas YouTubers who have nobody to answer to except our followers,
Yeah.
we're probably going to do what our followers are interested in. Now, granted, that does mean that you have a lot of people who go out there and they do exactly the same thing that the ghost hunting TV shows have been doing for decades, where I think my favorite is when they go in and they use iPhone apps for like spirit boxes
No,
instead of
I know.
a radio
I know
scanner.
which people you're talking
You know
about.
who I'm talking about. So like when I see that, I'm like, come on, man. You're just brazenly doing this for the clicks. Because there's no other way that something happens every single time you go into a haunted house.
The only
Like statistically, it is so implausible.
the only person I know is a more controversial comedian, but I do have a dark sense of humor, so it's everyone knows my sense of humor by now. Is Isaac Butterfield does he has like he calls it Devil's Advocate. And he like the amount of times he's gone to a place and nothing's happened. I'm like, okay, either you're very, very smart and you know that this will give you more validity, or stuff like
Yeah.
because he'll go like 2 or 3 episodes and like maybe a ball will move or something, and you're like, oh, that's all that happens in the entire episode. And then every now and then they will get a voice on a spirit box that is like very clearly addressing them. I'm like, I know how that could be faked easily,
Yep.
but the fact that nothing else has happened in these 40-minute videos you've done previously adds validity to it.
Yeah, that's what's become of my reaction streams is like I'll go and I'll do we'll watch a compilation of scary like ghosts caught on camera or whatever, and for the most part it is me sitting there going through and either saying yes, this is definitely fake and here's how you can tell, or this does look more realistic. If it was fake, here's how they might have faked it. Here's what would suggest it is versus what suggest it isn't. And that's kind of become a fun way of doing things. But I would love to get out there and do an actual ghost hunt. I don't know about you.
Same.
Um,
I can't say too many things, but I may or may not have some things in the works.
ooh.
Yeah,
My
they're very, very
girlfriend,
loose things, which is my personal.
my girlfriend and I have been looking at houses because I'm getting ready to buy, and she she and I went and checked one out this morning. Where we walked in, the downstairs was really nice. It's in a great neighborhood, really nice little small town. Walked in, the downstairs was gorgeous. Stucco on the outside probably needed some work, but little things. We get upstairs and we walk into one of the bedrooms, and it was just immediate bad vibes.
I know
Went,
I know the
went
exact
from
feeling you're meaning. Yeah.
went from oh, this is a cute little house to I just looked in that room and immediately I was like,
Nope.
yeah, we're gonna need to call the inspector, have an electrician come and take a look at the place, get the exorcist in here.
The Exorcist may be first. Then we may
Yeah,
get the Exorcist in first.
exactly.
Oh, my camera's going crazy again. Right, carry on as if nothing's happened. I'm going to
It
try and sort the
happens.
camera for a
It
second.
happens. Yeah.
So while like to bring us back on track, because whenever I start a podcast, my immediate thing to every guest is I will bring it into a tangent. But so with the less easily explainable cases, what
Mhm.
what leads you to a more preternatural conclusion, such as the Wendigo?
Uh it's It's usually when you get to a point where all other possibilities have been exhausted. If a person is found in a place that they physically cannot have gotten to,
Yes.
you have to start asking questions about how that happens. Um, the same thing goes for a number of these other aspects. Garrett Bardsley, for example, was a 12-year-old boy. He was a Boy Scout on a camping trip, and he vanished. A lot of people said mountain lion, possible.
Hmm.
No sign of struggle, no blood. Nobody heard any screams or anything. Now, mountain lions can kill silently, but nobody heard any screams, any sign of a struggle. There was no blood trail. And most importantly, Garrett was carrying a fishing pole when he disappeared. Nobody ever found the fishing pole.
Okay. What?
So, and this kid vanished completely from this mountain. Nowhere to be found. Another one was Jim McGrogan. He vanished from his trail. Nobody saw him leave. There were no tracks leading off into the distance. Like they followed every set of tracks off the trail. All of them had an end point where either like you could see that the person had started skiing down the mountain or had gone back, something like that. They searched for him for several days. And then I think it was 2 weeks later, some backcountry snowmobilers came across his body at the foot of a cliff, 4.5 miles east of the trail he had gone missing from. There were no tracks leading to that portion of the trail, or there were no tracks leading from the trail he was on to the cliff face where he was found. In order to get where he was going, he would have had to go up and down several ridges and canyons that he would have known were not part of his route, all off trail, not downhill. We would be going basically laterally along the mountain. All the while, the lights of the town of Vail, Colorado would have been visible to his right. He had a GPS, he had a cell phone, he had an avalanche beacon, he had a spare cell phone battery, he had food, he had water. He did not seek help. He did not double back. He just appeared 4.5 miles east of where he went missing at the foot of a cliff, dead from a fall. No explanation for how he got to the top of the cliff.
So you're saying something lifted him up by maybe, say, an anti-gravity beam and then moved him.
It is one of the few that, like, aliens does sound more likely, but
Why?
I don't.
We've because like I'm very open about like the fact that I'm not just convinced extraterrestrials have visited Earth. I'm not going to confirm nor deny that I believe that they may have communicated with certain governments throughout history. Not ancient aliens, not pyramids. I'm not that crazy. Just the Nazis. No,
Just the Nazis.
So you've got if you say it in the right tone with the British accent, everything sounds like a joke.
Little guys.
Got to be careful with the online safety bill now. Where was I? But yeah, no. With most abduction stories, it's like you don't often hear stories where people have like had family members who have had like abductions and then passed away. So that's the only thing I would like fight against my own case is like if they're gonna drop him, why drop him at the foot of a cliff? Like if they've experimented on him, like there would be more signs of stuff. It's more the case I think would definitely be more open to aliens is when the body is like never ever found. Because then I'd be like, well, that would just sound like they had an experiment and they just sort of kept the body. Yeah. But because that's my big argument is how we treat like dolphins. We see as like very intelligent creatures. We still take dolphins up, clip them, experiment on them. In certain experiments, we molest them. Don't look up the dolphin speaking experiment. The CIA has had some interesting moments apart from it. Like, the dolphin speaking experiment was a very interesting one. So like, if we can do that with a dolphins who, on the grand scheme of things, is maybe 2 or 3 million years behind us on intelligence, imagine something that has the ability to interstellar travel, just between
Mhm.
solar systems, which could take them maybe 100 or so years. To them, we are ants. We are so far behind them. If they've got intergalactic travel, we basically don't exist. And they like, and
Mhm.
if it's more towards, I remember you on the live when you said that you'd believed it more if it was interdimensional travel,
Mhm.
which still to this day I can't understand how you viewed that as the more likely scenario for aliens. But we can get into this podcast.
There's a lot of space between us and everybody else.
Yeah, but there's going to be a lot more. I mean, if you mean it as like they're bending the dimensions to travel, then yeah.
Maybe.
But like, if they've got interdimensional travel, they're definitely quite a bit ahead of us technologically and in like intelligence wise. So experimenting on us
I
trying to
mean,
like is going to be nothing to them.
wormhole travel would be interdimensional, technically, right? Because you'd be folding space time.
Yes, because
You'd be
because
going into the fourth.
dimensions don't work the way science fiction movies make them work. Because
Mhm.
we live in 4 dimensions now, which is time, space, and then like no, we live in 3D, and then the fourth dimension is time, isn't it? Yeah, I think so.
I,
I wasn't very good at physics. Oh, hang on.
I zero understanding of physics over here.
We've got a comment from Petro. Did you hear about the birds that are using metal spikes to protect their nests? Birds are piggybacking off of us, and they are in the metal age. I wouldn't quite say that, because they're not unless they're forging
Yeah,
weapons.
that's you got to be smelting and casting or smelting and forging to be
There,
in the metalworking age.
yeah, there is some.
That I got in so much trouble for saying that the majority of Native Americans were in the Stone Age when they encountered Europeans because
You,
people thought that was an insult.
when are
It's
you
like,
not in
no,
trouble? When are you
that
not
was
in
the
trouble?
that was the proper way to describe their level of
Yeah,
technology. It wasn't a dig. They had far less disease. Like they had they had perks. There were
well,
trade offs. It's just
it's no different.
oh
It's no different than saying that the the um the Beaker people were in the Stone Age, whilst the Hittites and the Assyrians were
yeah,
well into the Bronze Age.
yeah, it's the same thing. It's just stratification, man. Like we're
Yeah,
just talking about where people were. It's not.
we do
I think a
live.
lot of people have a tendency to like assume that you are using terminology in a derogatory way just because some people will. It's like yeah, some
Mm,
people say Stone Age is a way of saying primitive in an insulting way, but it's like if you're going to be describing the technological
level of
stage that they were in,
yeah.
they were using stone tools. Some of them were beginning to use beaten copper. Um, Also, they got there, as far as we know, far like 30,000 years behind Europeans. So you would expect them to be a little bit behind in terms of technology. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, again, it's the same sort of thing. Like when the Egyptians were building the Great Pyramids, the same time that my ancestors were busy dragging stone. Again, still a
Yeah.
big feat, but they were dragging
Mhm.
stones from Wales or Cymru, and they
We,
were
we weren't even yet.
like, yeah, like we we hadn't the Romans hadn't come over and beaten beaten our ancestors into
Exactly.
civilization. Well, that's my favorite quote from Karaticus is, "If you have all this, why
Yeah.
do you want to come steal from me?" Um,
Mhm.
it's an amazing quote. Um, I'm gonna get that tattooed at some point. I'm not gonna lie. But so looking at the supernatural cases, then what do you think? Because sort of is it the flesh gate
Mhm.
because that whole like the flesh pedestrian stuff sort of began around your videos. It was more of a
Yeah.
that
My bad.
what is the flesh pedestrian? Because I've seen you explain it a couple times.
Sure. So that all started from this general kind of unified theory regarding Bigfoot, the Wendigo, skinwalkers, because I back then had some misconceptions, some of the misconceptions most people have about how similar these things are. Now, the Wendigo and Sasquatch, you might be able to make an argument for. But Also, there's reasons that they wouldn't be connected. But yeah, so
Hmm.
the whole idea, the flesh pedestrian was kind of a tongue in cheek way of referring to this unified theory idea of there being some sort of ancient North American super predator, whether it was a specific tribe or another species, another race, something like that, that was, you know, basically very, very successful at hunting,
Hmm.
um, better instincts, more attuned physical features for, being mainly a predatory animal. And then as I did more research, I came to the understanding that these things are typically a lot less supernatural and a lot more human oriented, and that the there are ways in which it's supernatural. Like the Algonquin believe that the only reason that you could commit the taboo of cannibalism is if you are possessed by a demonic entity called the Wendigo.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh, so you don't
the
turn into the Wendigo, you're already
No,
possessed by
you
it.
are possessed by the Wendigo.
Okay.
So a Wendigo is a person who eats human flesh. The Wendigo is a spirit that drives people to eat human flesh.
So in because very recently another YouTuber I watch quite just like a lot is Count Dankula, and he did a video on
Mhm,
the Andes like crash where like
mhm.
all of the rugby players were forced to
Yeah.
eat each other. Would that be like a Wendigo thing, or is it because they're desperate to survive at that point?
So that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The So Wendigo psychosis, as it's called, is a culture-bound illness. Is considered a culture-bound illness.
Hmm.
Now, granted, this is psychology that was mostly being discussed in the like 1970s, but
Yeah.
the when I first heard that, I was like, that sounds like the kind of thing they were saying because they were like, oh, those primitive savages, you know? And then I read up on it a little bit more and I discovered that it's actually far more interesting and far less offensive. It's
Okay.
not that it was culture bound because oh, only primitive people could possibly have something like this. No. It's that cannibalism is such a taboo in Algonquin society that that they believe that no human being of their own free will could possibly eat another human. So they are so disgusted by cannibalism that they figure it must be supernatural. That is why it's culture bound. So what happened, this is the theory, the reason that you would have Algonquin people develop Wendigo psychosis while others would not. So if you had Europeans who had to eat other humans, they would not develop this belief that they were the Wendigo, that they had to eat other people. The Algonquin would. And part of the belief was that part of the psychological theory was since they are raised with that belief that eating human flesh turns you into a Wendigo, that only monsters eat human flesh. Therefore, if you eat human flesh, you're a monster.
Hmm.
Because they're raised with that, because that is so central to their culture, then if they do eat human flesh, they develop a
Be
psychosis that they must
convinced.
be a monster because only monsters eat human flesh.
So
So
if
it's kind of a circular thinking issue that causes them to genuinely believe they are a monster.
so do people outside of the culture end up with Wendigo psychosis, or is it like
So
entirely culture bound?
so that's the interesting part is Wendigo psychosis specifically different from what is kind of more colloquially known as the hunger,
Yeah.
because what you'll see is a lot of people who are in cannibalistic situations, often because of desperation, they will sometimes continue to crave human flesh even after they're fine. One example of this, a real life example that we're going to be talking about on my channel later tonight with Roanoke Tales, is the Donner Party. Most of the members of the Donner Party who were forced to eat human flesh did not insist on doing so when other food was available. There were, however, a few examples where it did happen. One was a guy named William Foster, who, despite the fact that they had fresh venison, insisted that they kill one of the members of their party when they were lost in the mountains because they needed the food. And one of the other members of the party, William Eddy, was like, "We have food. We don't need to kill." No, like, what's the point here? And he was just insistent that they kill her. But it might, in that case, it could be that he was paranoid that they were going to run out of food.
Yeah.
And so he was like, we might as well do it now while we're strong. Like, so it's possible that there was another motivator there. The more interesting one is Louis Keseberg. And granted, a lot more people than just these few men and women ate human flesh on that trip. It was probably most of the people who survived. Louis Keseberg was one of the last to be rescued. When he was found, he was in the process of frying a human liver and eyes, and I think one other organ.
Lovely.
Yeah, he had them in a pan. He was cooking them up. The thing was, the people who had found him had just been at his campsite. He was inexplicably several miles from his campsite at the older camp that the whole party had been at. He was over there, claimed he had gotten lost the night before while hunting. He, of course, had no game with him. It wasn't clear if he had a rifle either. But they had just been to his camp where there were fresh tracks, as in like within the last day. And what they found there was Keseberg's camp, by the way. He acknowledged that it was his camp. They found an iron kettle filled with human flesh.
All right.
Just feet away. Oh, they also found the body of George Donner, which had the skull split open and the brains picked out, and had been partially butchered. Just feet away from this were 3/4 of an ox, frozen, as in could have been taken out and thawed, boiled, anything, eaten, beef. Ox are just cattle.
Yeah.
Cattle bulls.
And they're very, very big as well. They feed a lot of people for a long time.
Yeah, even an emaciated one that died of starvation. And it wasn't clear that this was one that died of starvation. It could have been one of the ones they killed for food and then lost in the snow. Even an emaciated one is going to have enough meat on it to feed you for several days, possibly weeks.
So he just wanted human flesh.
And yet he was choosing to eat human flesh.
Which sounds very much like...
It's also not necessarily probable, but it's possible that he had murdered at least one member of the party for this purpose of eating them.
I don't know what to take from that. That was a much darker answer than I was expecting.
So the question there is, why do you get the hunger?
And if
what causes that?
Because there is like a that's cultural as well. There's multiple cultures. I know of
Wendigo psychosis is specific to the Algonquin, but the hunger that shows up everywhere.
I know multiple societies, especially in Asia, where that sort of thing is reported. Where people, once someone's had had to eat a lot of human flesh, it's not normally like one or two. That maybe it's like a traumatic rewiring of the brain.
It might be.
Like that would, but it's also in a weird way, it kind of validates the Wendigo mythos as a whole. Because even if you're not turning into like an emaciated, like grey creature crawling through the wilderness, you're still acting in a similar way, and you could very much see how those legends and myths could build up over centuries and millennia. And speaking of like a universal thing that happened, Plaz actually commented, you guys should look up some of the stuff people experience on DMT. That is a video I have debated tackling, but I'm not sure I'm that's more your side of things. It's not something I think I'm equipped to properly research. Because I know a lot of things about DMT, I just can't validate the sources.
That's the problem for me, is like when it comes to just how I am about research, I would I would have to
You would take
I'd have to
months.
do it.
You would take
I'd have to do it.
months doing
No,
that
I'd
one.
have to do it.
Oh no, you can't. I don't
Because I
think you.
couldn't take their word. I can't take their word on it that
Yeah,
they
but
actually experienced.
some of the things that people have seen, because what intrigues me about DMT trips, less so with like stuff like acid, but with DMT trips, the amount of people who have never met each other at all that turn around and say, I experienced this and this and this in my trip, and then someone else goes, actually, yeah, this and this and this, but I went through this door and I met this person,
Yep, nope,
which is
I'd have to do it myself to know that they're not lying.
yeah. I feel like Thornbury would be very upset if I
Same.
don't. I feel like Aidan's gonna try and do DMT to research it. You might need to stop it.
See the problem?
Yeah,
There was another thing too. What was? Oh yeah, the making a homunculus. I was like, if I'm gonna prove you can't do that, I'm gonna have to try and do it.
please.
That's kind of a gross process.
That's not something I would want to see on the Law Lodge. I'm not
No.
gonna lie. It's just like to prove you can't make a homunculus. We tried to make a homunculus.
To prove that Mind Unveiled is even more full of shit than you thought.
Mind Unveiled has almost certainly sat there every single Friday night going, I can make a homunculus. That's
Mind Un that he really thought he won.
That's the same with the Vosh versus Count Dankula debate. The Vosh fans still think Vosh won that. When it's anyone outside of it, it's so obvious Dank won that. Looking back, also, I got a comment from Sir Woolley. Isn't the Wendigo the thing you're not supposed to say or mention or it'll eat you, or am I getting my cryptids mixed up?
No, you're correct. It's just that that is not. It's not a thing.
Yeah,
Like you're not supposed to talk about it frivolously
yeah. Isn't
in
it
an
like
academic context.
because there is a isn't there a
It's
isn't there a specific like name like because we have Wendigo, which is like the
Well,
what
no, because
we're
they
giving
got
to
Wendigo,
outsiders.
Wendigo, Wetiko, Wehetico, Windigo. There's it's the word Wendigo is one variant within an entire language family.
Okay,
The Algonquin languages are like the Celtic languages, the Germanic languages, the Italic languages.
yeah,
So you're gonna have words like let's see, what's a good example? Ri in Welsh means king.
yeah.
And then I believe that Ruach is king
In Irish,
in Irish.
yeah.
So it's like that, where yeah, Ri and Ruach both mean king. They're both the same word. Why would saying one of them invoke something and the other not?
So where did that part of the mythos come from?
It's
Do you
that you're
think?
not supposed. It's that it is frowned upon to talk about it
Just
in the same
casually.
way that speak of the devil is you're not supposed to talk about the devil. It's the
Okay, yeah,
same
yeah.
kind of you're not supposed to talk about bad things lest they appear. That's kind of universal to all cultures, but it's not that if you talk about it, it summons it. It's just that you're not supposed to talk about the bad things. It's it
Yeah.
because it may attract them. It's not going to attract it. And the idea is that you're not supposed to, tell ghost stories about the Wendigo sitting around the fire in a joking context. Now, if you're telling your ghost story about the Wendigo sitting around the fire and you're dead serious,
Then
you're
it's fine.
warning, you're telling the youth about the dangers of the forests, then it's fine. So it's not that the story is being told, it is the reason and the manner in which the story is being told.
So is it like the Wendigo sees it as you're mocking it, and it's like a challenge? It's got to challenge your hubris, sort of thing. That's why that can get you in
I
trouble.
don't think it's even I'm not sure that it even goes that far. I think it really just is, don't speak about bad things because it makes them it attracts them. Like so it's the difference between saying it does summon it, so you're not supposed to ever say it, and you're not supposed to say it unless it's a serious reason.
I think it's a very similar concept. I have an old uni friend, and like she had this like concept, especially like if I like when I was in my edgy atheist phase, which I just cringed, like little fedora, and I remember discussing, and I was just joking about, and I was joking doing, I did the sign of devil and stuff. No, because words have power, and it was like a sit down of like the explaining for that, which is again, I think it's another multicultural thing where there's the words having power and like what you're describing. It's like now as I've gotten older, if you notice in my videos, I never say death or died. I say passing on or passed on in everything, which is I think it's a bit nicer, especially when you're talking, unless I really don't like the historical figure. Like all my Cromwell videos, I still get heat from Cromwell fans for that video.
I just find it very funny that there's Cromwell fans.
Very
Like,
hardcore.
As an American, what?
It's really funny when you get Cromwell fans in your comments and then you get Irish people in your comments. That's really fun. It's not fun for the Cromwell fans. It's fun for me to watch the Cromwell fans get eviscerated.
Yeah, like, I will. There are certain cultural nuances to you Brits that I don't think I'll ever totally understand.
There's cultural nuances that I mean, you have to remember. If I drive an hour down the road, I will meet someone with an entirely different accent to me, an entirely different upbringing, and like an entirely different worldview. Like we are, like the United States just squished. If you think about it.
Yeah, you got to go pretty far before you're gonna see major cultural shifts in the U.S.
Yeah, I know. Like I literally when I visited Count Daedalus in the vlogs, the first one's already come out. The dramatic shift in people was insane. But to get on to back, looking at the time, because I know you guys you want to get to filming, and I can't don't want to keep you too long. So with the supernatural preternatural sort of thing, I know you don't go for the extraterrestrial, but here's what I've been saving for this is when I looked up, I was like, I'm going to research this a little bit because I want to go into this and I want to have a sure thing that I can say there is at least an extraterrestrial element. The map of the US cave systems and the map of all UFO sightings and reported alien abductions match up almost perfectly. And I mean, like,
yeah, but so do the missing persons.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
It's like, and so when I was like, okay, well, let's compare like certain sightings. The supernatural stuff kind of varies because it's harder to gather information because you're looking at different supernatural elements depending on where you are in the US. Very similar to like how if someone went missing in Wales or in England in medieval Europe, then it would be the Woodwoes, but up north it'd be the Amphiolaeth Moor. That's that sort of thing. Right. So what I pose to you is perhaps our two hypotheses actually overlap somewhat in the central theme being the caves. Because there's multiple cultural stories like from Vietnam and South America and Mexico of like lizard people like coming out of caves, right? And that's getting into very risky territory because the Hollow Earth people appear and they're like, hello! And I'm like, well, no, cave systems, because it's all long been hypothesized that if there was any like sentient civilization, it would be in caves on Mars and stuff. And I was sitting there, I was like, did this make the two hypotheses completely incompatible to each other? And then I realized, well, no, because there's a lot of caves in America. And looking at the map, I mean a lot. Also, a weird thing, most UFO and abduction sightings mostly appear around limestone caves.
Yes.
Is that a similar thing for your as well?
Well, so the profile, so if David Politis's version singles out granite. I will say, as for the limestone caves issue, I think that could largely have something to do with simply the fact that limestone is prone to caving.
Okay.
There are simply just a lot of limestone caves by comparison to all the other forms of caves. I'm not saying that to like immediately be like, no, it's impossible. It's just I having done the research I've done over the years, it's gotten to the point where it's like there are a lot of things where I've come to that over time there's bits and pieces where there has been an explanation that tends to crop up often. One of those is that limestone does tend to be a common material for caves because of its softness.
It's not an actual piece of evidence. It's just that there happens to be more
I,
limestone caves.
I'm not saying that it's impossible that it could be connected.
Okay.
It's just that it is always important to consider
But
the other possibilities, because when you go dive into conversation with somebody who really is a hardcore skeptic, those are the things they're going to bring up. So it's important to consider those first, and they might be right.
yeah,
Sometimes the skeptics are right, and you got to revisit. You know, I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make is they get so bogged down in their specific understanding of what's going on, their specific theory, that they become rigid and they won't accept changes to it when the evidence presents itself. But as
yeah,
for the limestone, I do not know a ton about geology. Not a
same,
huge geology
same.
guy, but what one thing that I am aware of is that a lot of the limestone formations that exist today were formed during the end of the last ice age. So when you look at them, if you were gonna find evidence of human beings, like if you were gonna find the places where human beings would have been, I think you would want to look at some of those limestone caves.
Yeah, I think that makes
If
the most
if
sense.
if there were a place where people were to be cut off for thousands of years, I think it would have something to do with a lot of those caves and a lot of those glaciated regions.
Do you think?
So if well,
Sorry, go on.
I guess just to give you one last bit here about it. Younger Dryas, the glaciers extend further and further down. You know, huge swath of territory becomes uninhabitable. That could, for a extended period of time, cut off a large population of people from the Siberian population. You would see changes there.
Hmm.
That might be a proto population that, when the next wave came over, had diverged enough to be the Saskets.
Yes.
If you understand yeah, that's where I was coming from with that. But yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying is it. I think that yes, these things can be connected. It's just important to always consider the other possibilities. But
Do,
uh,
do you think you could have like a descent situation then if like there was a because
mhm,
that's the one that always throws me off about that is I'm like, yeah, how did they feed? Because unless you're going full carnivore diet, and I like that's not scientifically proven as of yet. Although I do want to test again. Going back to the DMT
yeah,
thing, I kind of want to test it myself before I poo poo it. But
yeah. So if you are eating a wild carnivore diet, you're going to be getting a lot more nutrients than if you were eating a domestic carnivore diet.
okay,
So cattle who are primarily grass fed, you're only going to get whatever nutrients the animal was eating.
yeah,
A deer out in the wild is eating more stuff than a cow in a pasture. So you're getting a more well-rounded, full nutrient body.
does
Now
that
you're going to get less fat in venison, but you are getting a wider variety of nutrients through the food that the animal itself is eating. Uh, but if you look out in the wild, you need a population of 50 to
mm,
maintain safe reproduction. So that is a population of 50 that does not necessarily need to live all in one place. That is
okay,
a population of 50 that could live in scattered small family units. You could have small clans that are 15 people. You could have large families that are 7 people, and they could trade back and forth when you need mates. You could have small colonies that are off in the mountains. But what the stories we hear are from about like the Saskets, for example, is there's typically small groups, no more than a dozen, and they live in caves in the mountains.
There's an interesting thing because I often go on about Dartmoor because
Mhm.
I've been through Dartmoor and I will tell anyone that is a mysterious place. And then there are so many reports of family units, Neanderthal style
Mhm.
family units on Dartmoor. But
Interesting.
they're never. It's a very common occurrence. When I
From
looked
when?
into the woodwoes, I don't know if I took it out or not. Um, no, I think I might have mentioned that there was like there was a woman especially who like was talking about these people going in and out of houses. Dartmoor's a big place. Do I think it could maintain a large, unnoticeable human population? Yes, if the government didn't care to look, but there's also a lot of military operation. And again, my counter argument to a lot of people when they say, "Oh, the Sasquatch and that couldn't exist because we had noticed them," I'm like, by this point,
Mhm.
humans have been around, especially in Europe, and it's like in more recently, obviously, like large population centers of human beings in like North America and South America.
Mhm.
They would have learnt to go, don't go near those people. That
Mhm.
like we would be the threat, and they would learn a ways around us, especially if they're intelligent enough. So, do I
Mhm.
believe that it's a complicated? There are reports. That it's undoubted that there are reports. Could they just be like families that have just gone sod it, we're leaving civilization? That's the most
Mhm.
likely outcome. Do I believe there's
Yeah.
Neanderthals? I don't believe there's Neanderthals roaming around in the United
Yeah.
Kingdom. I don't think that's out in Siberia, maybe, but that's for another. That's for another day. Um,
Right.
so my whole thing with the caves and such is what I think there's enough caves in America alone for like a Wendigo to sleep in there, or a family of Saskets, or a family of
Mhm.
Sasquatch to sleep in one
Right.
set of caves, and then 20, 30 miles down in a mountainside where people report seeing lights coming out of. Yeah, there's
Mhm.
could definitely be a secret installation of extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
And speaking of extraterrestrials, there is Trip Smoke Pit Fairy Tales who we was discussing having intercourse with aliens on the last podcast and divulging military secrets.
We were what?
Yeah, no, you should read his books. They're about banging aliens in World War
Not Alien
Four.
Ussy.
No, oh no, don't start. You've said that. You are aware. Every time you add "ussy" to anything, it becomes a meme,
Mhm.
and I will go on your
Mhm.
chat later and make sure it does.
Are
Um,
they would the Greys be the Grussy?
the Greys don't actually breed with anyone though. In the abduction stories, they have like tall blonde people in these stories that they send into another room who are meant to be grey hybrids. Also, there's if you look up the film,
That just feels like another that feels like it's getting Aryanism involved again.
the yeah no, if someone starts talking to you about Nordics, run.
Mhm.
Because they're like, oh yes, no, did you know there's an alien race of very tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed people? I'm going, I've heard this somewhere before. I don't.
Mhm.
I've heard this sounds awfully familiar.
I
Zetus.
want to talk about Tool and Hyperborea, but I'm worried about getting accused of being a Nazi
This is
because you
this is
can't talk about the Roman and Greek concepts without it getting tied into the fact that the Nazis thought it was real.
this is why I'm very careful when I talk about aliens now. Is because you kind of have to bring up the Nordics because the Nazis weren't the first people to think it up. The amount of stuff that they weren't the first people to think it up, but then because they co-opted it. Um,
Oh yeah, the Nazis weren't like the Nazis were evil, but they were not original.
yeah. The whole but no the whole like tall people that the Greys be like using like in the actual alien abduction stories they're hybrids, whereas in the Nazi version of these stories they're like purebreds, and I'm like, I don't think you understand the idea. It's almost like they would be trying to cover for an alien race that might have given them technology. That is getting really conspiratorial. I'm not saying I believe that the Nazis had help from aliens. I'm just saying that there is some UFO shaped craft that they may have been working on that has me a bit raising eyebrows.
Mhm,
Um, the Nazi Bell is actually something I really want. I'm getting proper
mhm.
sidetracked now. I do really want to look into the Nazi Bell. I'm not saying that's alien. I'm just saying that's a very interesting thing that got hushed up
Yeah.
by a certain three-letter agency. And whenever they hush anything up, it makes me interested. To hurriedly end things off, so I don't keep you too long.
You're fine.
How
You're
much
fine.
how much longer have you got before?
You're good. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can.
we good.
Yeah.
Um, because I want to lead into next now, because I think this was originally meant to be a debate, and it's gone the exact way I thought it would, where we've kind of just gone, yeah, our theories sort of coalesce at certain points. It's just that I think I think I necessarily agree with your theory more than you agree with mine.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical that there was a single unified cause to the missing 411 phenomenon, because I think too much of it is random
Yeah.
tragedy. And the strange ones, I want to take another look at geography.
Mm.
Because I think that you can rule out. I wonder if what happened was David Paulides found a few, the really really interesting ones, and connected the dots of all of those, and then started looking at other ones that fit the profile, and started bringing in cases that maybe fit 50 to 70% of it. And I think that's where it kind of fell apart, where you start to see some of these
Yeah.
cases like Aaron Hedges, where there's a very obvious reason that just simply wasn't reported.
Mm.
That's by no means am I trying to discredit the guy. I think he's done very good work. I just think that there are certain times where his confirmation bias gets the best of him. But yeah, so I think that whatever the really strange ones are being caused by, I am still more partial to the idea of like feral people,
Mm.
or something along the lines of the more accurate, like true to life Wendigo that's talked about. But as always, if I were to see concrete evidence of UFOs, I mean, I believe in UFOs. I just don't know that I believe in space aliens.
Okay. Okay, that's. And, I don't know. I don't. To be fair, it's one of those things where I don't think, because it's like with ghosts. I'm not 100% there on ghosts, so I do get where you're coming from. Where like UFOs is there. We know UFOs are a thing. Even I will say most UFOs are military testing craft.
Oh,
As I was saying, like as me and Trip were talking about in the last one, it was like, oh yeah, no, the stealth bomb has suddenly been revealed. Oh, hang on, wait, didn't everyone say they were seeing triangular UFOs all of a sudden? Like,
mm-hmm.
most of the time, yeah. It's like with Area 51. There's nothing at Area 51. That's been, all the US government have been sitting there for ages going, oh, what's at Area
Oh well,
51?
there's stuff at Area 51. It's experimental aircraft.
Yeah, all the
It's
aliens are at Area 53, guys. Like,
yeah. So now I will say this much: I would be willing to believe that maybe not Roswell specifically, but a Roswell
mm,
was legit. That maybe we had one legitimate alien spacecraft crash, and that's what the rest of it has been since. Has been us trying to reverse engineer. But I would be much more willing to believe that there was one alien spacecraft that crashed, that one scout vessel,
yeah.
one Lewis and Clark ended up getting here.
I have to say, if there is extraterrestrials and they haven't colonized us yet, I would be more worried. Because I would be far more worried, because that means they just want to run experiments. Like,
well, that's the thing is, so that's what I wonder is if Roswell was that there was a deep space recon kind of deal,
how
and they
far away
didn't
is the
come.
rest of them?
Well, that's the thing is, if they didn't come get it, it probably means they're not here yet,
and they're on their way.
it might mean that they're in the, think about where we are right now with like the Voyager. The next step from Voyager one day will be a manned mission. Manned exploratory. There will be a point at which we're sending out satellites that are surveying planets, and eventually we're going to send a manned mission to one of those planets.
How would you say
and
that
it might be that manned mission is well aware that they will not be coming back.
So you're saying that, like, because the one that I think is more convincing than Roswell, purely because it's very hard to find information on it, is the Brazilian crash in the I think it was in the Amazon. There was reports of a Brazilian crash, and the people
Mhm.
that were there have said there's bodies. The only reason it gets poo-pooed a lot is because it was first really mentioned on Joe Rogan,
Mhm.
which, as much as Joe Rogan has some interesting guests on, he doesn't really push back properly.
He
Bless
does
him.
not vet very
Yeah,
well.
he does not vet very well.
The number of people he's had on the show who have talked about the missing 411 phenomenon and have just basically recited the most conspiratorial version of it, with zero discernment or attempt to key in on the facts, is
My
astonishing.
favorite Joe Rogan clip's the Graham Hancock clip where Rowan just sitting there going, "Uh huh, uh huh, wow, uh huh," just like
Mhm.
you've got
Did you ever
no
try
clue.
DMT?
Yeah, yeah. Joe Rogan's definitely regularly. I love the fact. Wait, who was it?
Oh yeah.
Someone, I think it was Sir Willie, actually said, "History Daddy." Incriminating himself by filming himself saying he wants to do DMT, and to respond to that, when neither of us are saying we want to do DMT, we're just kind of suggesting that we were to try and for research, to be thorough with research. To finish off though, what I because missing 411 covers a lot of bodies of water,
Mhm.
which obviously links to the mythology side of the Celtic otherworld.
Right.
So I did a little bit of digging, and the Celts are far from the only people who see bodies of water as mythical portals. In fact,
Oh yeah.
The Japanese and the Chinese, and possibly the Koreans, also had similar beliefs. I believe it's a Japanese story where out of the water a few centuries ago came a craft, and a man came out of the craft and he integrated himself with society, and he said he was lost from another world,
Mhm.
right? Obviously, they
That
viewed it
sounds
as
like
like
a
the heavens. Sounds like an explorer. Again,
yeah.
guys, this isn't ancient aliens. My view of ancient aliens is they may have come down to explore, but there's no way in hell they would have sat there and gone, "I'm going to help you build the pyramids with magnets,"
Mhm.
because there's no
And
evidence
there's
of
no reason they would
magnets.
have done it back. There's no reason they would have done it back then and not
Yeah.
again now.
Yeah, exactly. They would have at some point they would have turned around and been like, I don't know, maybe that's why the biggest pyramid in the world is a Bass Pro Shop or whatever that fishing company is.
Mhm.
Maybe that's how he got the idea. Um, but so do you think there could be a connection? Because again, you get the stories of mermaids and stuff, and
Mhm.
I will admit I am very partial because if you look at the evolutionary trajectory of a mermaid, it is
Right.
possible. I'm not saying that it like in the way it's described, like a human body and then a fish, like
Mhm.
it is possible. Do you think there could be a correlation between a large amount of missing 411 happening around bodies of water, which could easily be debunked as someone got drunk and fell in, like, or just fell into the water and drowned? Like, it's
Mhm.
obviously very easily explainable. But is there a possibility, similar to the caves, that a large point of UFOs coming out of bodies of water, or a lot of mythology about, hey, don't go near water because things come out of the water from another world and the missing
Mhm.
411? Do you think there could be another link there? Looking at saying there's not a monolith to the
Mhm.
missing 411, could it be a possible suggestion?
So I'm torn when it comes to the issue of bodies of water and portals to other worlds because
Okay.
it's unclear, kind of the chicken and the egg thing. Did they see bodies of water as portals to other worlds because they had crossed into other worlds by going over bodies of water? Or did they see them as portals to other worlds because things had come across the water to them? Or was it that things were coming out of ponds? Because that's an entirely different circumstance. If you're like,
Yeah.
yes, there are, strangers who arrive from across the ocean. Okay, well, we can go some places with that are very mundane. Might tell us some interesting things about who was coming from where, but mundane nonetheless. Um, if if humans were emerging out of ponds, that's different. Then we got to start looking into what's going on there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure would probably be the best answer. Now what I would wonder is if water is involved and there are people coming out of the water and there are people living under the water, are we still dealing with caves?
There's a lot of
Because
underwater caves.
a lot of underwater caves, and you could if you are a population that has been living primarily underground for thousands of years, then you would be capable. Probably you would have developed to be able to navigate underwater caves fairly well, hold your breath longer, you know,
Mm.
see underwater better.
I mean, it also is quite terrifying. Like there was a story, I believe it was a Russian group, a Soviet group, and obviously a lot of this is heavily redacted because Soviet. Um, I believe it might have been an American operation. Fairly certain it was a Soviet one, where they went in underwater, and as they were going, they saw these lights ahead of them, and as they were diving deeper and deeper down, they found like these aquatic people, and then the aquatic people, like, apparently one reached out a hand, there was a light, a load of people got burnt and stuff, which is a weird thing. A lot of any sort of hyper weapon, there's always burning or something
Mhm.
involved. There was actually a very prominent case of UFO that they attacked in Vietnam, where it was just hovering over them, and then
Mhm. Do you recall any of the names here?
the Vietnam or the Soviet story.
The Soviet story, the underwater people.
It's on the Wartime Stories YouTube channel that I can send you the link to after the show if you want
Yeah,
me
if you
to.
can send it to me.
Or it might be Bedtime Story. It's one of those YouTube channels. I'll send it over to you because it is an interesting story. But the briefly of it, so they all rush back to the surface. A couple of them do pass away because they get the bends, I believe. But then all of a sudden, out of the cave that they've seen, a craft comes out, which then goes into, because I've had these debates with other people, is what if the aliens that we see in the crafts aren't aliens at all? What if they're other beings that are also hyper intelligent,
Yeah.
which goes into the lizard men people. What's your thoughts on the lizard men stuff? Because there's a lot of most lizard men stories come from South America and Vietnam War. So what's your thoughts
Mhm.
on the lizard man stuff?
Uh, I I have similar questions about that I have
Oh, sorry,
about
sorry. With
the
the
dog man.
Plaz just said the Soviet one is Lake Baikal in the chat.
Lake Baikal. Lake Baikal.
I feel like there's a Law Lodge video coming on this now. I feel like I've intrigued, piqued your interest.
Well, it depends on. Let's see. There's some historical traditions. They believe that Christ visited the area.
I
Interesting.
did not know that about Lake Baikal.
Um, I'm not seeing anything in it about a Soviet mission, though. I'll have to take a look at it.
There may
Um,
that may be an upcoming. That's on your
yeah, we'll see.
long list because you've got a list like me of like that. My list is miles
Yeah,
long of like mythology and like history. I keep going in.
yeah.
There,
It's just our videos are now so in depth and long that it needs to be like the topic needs to be something with meat to it. If it's gonna
yeah.
be a less than like 20-minute video, we can't touch it.
I see. I started going on to like the hour long videos and now I split them into like half, like 20-minute, half hour ones. I've gone the
Mhm.
opposite way of like instead of doing long documentaries, I started splitting them. But yeah, no. What is your thoughts on the lizard stuff? I don't
Yeah.
believe lizard
So
people run the government or anything, but
so I do wonder if the lizard people stories have an origin uh in foreign cultures, which is something that we see pretty frequently
hmm.
with when there's an other group of people who are associated with some sort of animal. Um Sometimes, I have the same I wonder the same thing about the dogmen, the adlet of Inuit
Yes.
folk, because they're described as having the heads of dogs, but the bodies of men. So what I wonder, and their origin story involves Europeans as well. So I wonder if the adlet were the dog men were people who were wearing dog heads, wolf heads. So either maybe they encountered Viking berserkers, or Ulfhednar, or just people who were wearing those pelts for ceremonial reasons.
Mm.
So the story comes from Greenland, from the Greenland Inuit. So one possibility would be that these Adlet who went across the sea to the mainland, well, that might have been a callback to when the Vikings landed at Newfoundland and had their settlement at Lanzo Meadows.
Mm.
And maybe that's where that dog-headed people came from. It's actually the Vikings. Or it could have been that there were natives on the mainland who wore wolf headdresses. The only reason I mentioned the Vikings as part of it is because the story mentions that some of the children from this pairing of a dog and a woman went east and became the Europeans. That's the only reason I mentioned the Vikings, is that the Europeans are mentioned in the story.
Yeah.
So I wonder the same about lizard people. Were there people who, maybe wore the snake? We know that the Aztecs worshipped the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl.
Mm.
So could lizard people have been another tribe, another culture that used lizard ornamentation or worshipped a lizard or something like that? And then over time, do you end up with the misconception that they were in fact lizard men?
My only counter to that is especially in the Vietnam War stories, which is where I get the most credible lizard man stories from.
Okay.
They're described as intelligent beings that are come out of caves. There's one story where they come out of caves in robes. So the American GIs are lined up for an ambush. They think they're about to go and take out a load of Viet Cong in this cave. And as the two figures come out, they're like, okay, we've got the movement, let's get ready to go. They're in purplish robes, I believe, that are made of weird material. And then as the two lizard men come out, they realize, wait, what? That's not a human. And then, being Americans, you guys do have one impulse only when encountering anything, and you have a firearm in your hand, which was they
lit, boys.
They lit it up.
Anyway, it's not a blast.
Yeah. And the lizard men apparently the rounds were just ricocheting off these creatures.
So the only thing is, there's also the story of the Kandahar giant.
I believe that story.
I can find nobody really? Whose actual name is attached to the story.
Yeah, but
there's
a good chance they wouldn't want their name attached because it could have destroyed their military career.
I know, but you know me. You know me. I need more than just I need more than a legend to believe something. So that's the only thing with the Vietnam thing is this something where there were multiple witnesses who attested to this with their real names? Was there any sort of incident report? Was anything mentioned? Did the U.S. military open an investigation into, technology that could deflect bullets after this? Is there anything that would imply that this event actually did happen? And then after that, I'm willing to start investigating and changing my mind about things. But
okay, I think you've got much more of a sign. You can tell who did medieval studies and who did film. One of us is the research has to be spot on. I'm like, well, I can.
Well, I think also part of it is I genuinely do believe in a lot of weird stuff.
Same.
And I'm out here trying to prove it exists.
Yeah.
So I have a much bigger I have a much bigger stake in making sure that my content is bulletproof than a lot of people do. I recently saw a tweet from everybody's favorite Atlantis bro, Jimmy Corsetti, who asked the question, are these three triangles and a squiggly line on a 7,000-year-old Nubian artifact the pyramids? And of course, I'm just like, Jimmy, my guy, there are so many other possibilities for what those could be. I'm not saying they're not the pyramids.
Becomes confirmation bias.
I would be very excited. I would be extremely excited if those were the pyramids.
It's very much it's
But
like it's like you did in your Graham Hancock video where you was like, he's asking the right questions, but he's already confirmed the answer before he's asked them.
exactly, which is the issue that I have, and it's why I get frustrated, specifically with Jimmy Corsetti a lot. Is like, no, the Rashat structure is absolutely, positively not a man-made structure. There was never a city on it. There is zero evidence. It was never, that region was never flooded. Like, it is not Plato's Atlantis. It simply is not. And yet he insists that it is, and goes so far in videos as to say that it even has the right dimensions that Plato gives, and it doesn't. It has completely different dimensions from what Plato gives. It actually does not match Plato's description of Atlantis. There are a few minor things, like that there are mountains in the general vicinity, and that it was made of concentric circles.
So it's like the most basic links.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Now, there is no evidence that there was ever human habitation there. The last time it had water, or it hasn't had water except for a period that would have been after the fall of Atlantis. It has, I think, never, ever, ever, ever been close to the ocean. Like, it's not Atlantis. I love that he's latched on and he's trying to prove it. But I think trying to prove the location of Atlantis right now is a lot less important than proving that Atlantis could have existed.
Yeah.
That the conditions existed for
Atlantis.
a human society at that scale, and that time, we need to establish that there was a place for it to exist. I also think that the idea of Atlantis as a single city might be a foolish pursuit. I think that the idea of Atlantis as concentric circles, we got to remember exactly how much of Plato's work was allegory.
The allegory of the cave, people.
Yeah.
He loved this allegory.
That's what the thing is. What about Plato's version of Atlantis is allegory, and what is history? I think that him giving the date in which it sank is history. I think him giving the general geography, the direction it was in, is probably history. But it's possible that the concentric circles are describing the way that the society was run. It could be a cosmological thing. So it doesn't really make sense to build a city in concentric circles.
No.
Why would you do that? Now, it does make sense to construct an empire in concentric circles of responsibility.
Yeah.
Where there's an outer border, and then within that maybe vassal states, and then
how Rome works.
Another shell, and then a shell, and then a shell.
Yeah.
So that's different. That seems more likely to me. And I don't think that Plato's Atlantis is necessarily even one society. I think that he might have been combining a bunch of different things.
Do you think he could have just been maybe referring to Assyria?
No.
No? Okay. To be fair, we had an entire podcast episode specifically discussing this, which was, you should go back and watch it, guys. You can watch me slowly. You can actually watch me accidentally prove your point when I tried to debunk it, which was the funniest part of the whole thing. When I just turn around and go, well, actually, because you see these flood myths all over the world, and then I'm like, shit. You can see, but right, okay, we're gonna go to questions now because it is 7:30 for me, so I'm assuming it's getting on for you.
Yeah, it's about 2:30 here.
Yeah. Time zones. When I tried to sync up with when I did the podcast episode with Dennis, that was interesting because Australia. Right, okay, so we've got from Plaz, the original word for bear, and I think a couple of languages is lost because people stopped saying it and passed on the word for fear of the bear. It's very interesting.
I have heard that.
Have you guys seen from Murgot? Have you guys watched the 1999 film Ravenous? I have not.
I haven't. I keep hearing I should.
I'm assuming it probably fits both. It probably fits more of my mythology content. I believe
it's kind of a cannibalism Wendigo situation.
this, I'm assuming it
In a remote
sounds.
military outpost in the 19th century, Captain John Boyd and his regiment embark on a rescue mission, which takes a dark turn when they are ambushed by a sadistic cannibal.
So yeah,
Yeah,
it's very Wendigo. Do you know what it kind of? Do you know what it
that
kind
would
of?
be that would be a good one to watch. Yeah.
The one they made us watch in uni for film was kind of, well, we didn't have to watch it because it's bearing in mind the director nearly went to prison because of it and was Cannibal Holocaust
Jeez. Why did you nearly go to prison?
because he so they actually thought he killed the people. Basically, the
Oh,
plot of Cannibal Holocaust is he goes. You know, have you seen Cannibal Holocaust? Haven't you?
I haven't.
So basically, also he did go to jail. He did get in trouble for animal cruelty because they actually do like slice up a turtle in that film. All of the animal cruelty that happens in Cannibal Holocaust actually happened. In fact, it's one of the major reasons at the end of films you can now have no animals were harmed in the making of this film.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Basically, all of the actors had to come forward and say, "Yeah, no, it was. Oh, we're alive. We're
That's
acting.
kind of
We
funny.
just went to an actually allegedly cannibal tribe in the middle of the Amazon, and then let them act out as if they was actually killing us." And I'm sitting there, I'm like, "Why did you sign up to this film? Like, I'm when I've
Utterly
made
insane.
films, I get into it. I don't get into, hey,
Uh-huh.
let's risk my cast and crew's life." From Smoke Pit Fairy Tales, good old trip. Um, Thoughts on the Tibetan Hollow Earth theory, and maybe it was just being a massive cave system.
Tibetan Hollow Earth
Have you
theory?
heard of the Tibetan Hollow Earth theory?
No?
I know of the Hollow Earth theory. I didn't know there was a specific Tibetan one.
Yeah, I know about the Hollow Earth theory. I did not know there was one specific to Tibet. I've heard of the Admiral Byrd one, which I probably should do a video on
Is
soon.
that one where you go to the North Pole? I've seen that interview and I do believe him. I'm not gonna lie.
So here's the thing. His original journal does not recount the things that that story tells of.
Could he not be hiding that though, so he doesn't like get Clintoned from the back? Like,
Well, no. So it's basically his original. He may have never flown over the North Pole on that trip.
no. So he might be full of it.
Mm-hmm. I have been planning on doing a video on that. Operation High Jump is definitely one that would be worth tackling, and next time I have the willpower to do a video that actually requires a lot of dedication,
It's gonna be
I
6
will
hours.
do it. But I am now so frustrated with YouTube that who
Gonna have,
knows when that will be.
gonna have to start posting to Rumble.
Yeah.
Hang on, where are we? But yeah, no, the
I did see
Operation.
somebody mention Maddock Gruffith or Maddock Owen Gruffith. Maddock Owen Gwyneth. Sheesh. Who was a legendary Welsh prince who allegedly came over to America.
Yeah,
But the version of the story, the earliest version of the story is lost, which was from the 1250s. And it would have still been 80 years after his alleged journey that would have been published. But the thing is, a lot of the earliest version of the story that exists today is a poem from like the 1450s that says he went across the sea, but does not mention America. In the 1500s, they start to mention America, and it's so convenient that this guy from Wales, which I mean Wales back then was independent, but now Wales is part of England, so any of their claims are our claims. And it just so happens that this Welsh prince landed in Florida a long time before any Spanish people. So that means we get Florida actually. And then suddenly it was also, oh no, he landed at Newfoundland. Oh wait, no, it was New York. Oh, actually, he went all the way inland to Nebraska. Like, you see, so
It was
Now
just empires being
listen,
silly, goofy empires.
there is nobody who wants it to be true that the first people to set up a successful colony in America were the Welsh more than me, but I'm going to need to see more evidence first. That said, I did speak to a very well regarded professor of medieval studies, a man who got his PhD at Oxford, uh, and was one of my professors. And he did tell me that while the Maddox story lacks evidence, it is entirely possible, if not probable, uh, that a Welsh nobleman in 1170 would have heard the stories of lands to the west that the
Yeah.
Vikings found. So, if there were a prince who simply wished to escape his family's infighting after the death of his father, and he wanted to go somewhere that wasn't France or Norway, he might consider going across the sea to start a new country. So, is it possible? Yes. Is there evidence for it? Not currently. But that's why places like Oak Island are interesting. And Oak Island frustrates me because those jackasses are preventing us from doing any actual history. You know how you know that the Masons have no power?
Go on.
We're pretty sure Oak Island has to do with us. We can't do anything about getting the rights to it.
Isn't it in control of the Canadian government now? Because my
Nope.
dad watches Oak Island a lot.
Oh, it might. Yeah, the Canadian government may have taken over now, but whatever it is, they're still leasing it to the people making the show. But yeah, so if the Freemasons had a shred of the power people think we did, we'd be the ones running Oak Island at the moment.
Don't get me wrong. I do think there is something hidden on Oak Island. I just think that whatever it is, you're not going to see it on TV. It would
No.
it'd be a situation of like, hey, so we found a lightsaber, and then Canadian government was, yeah, no, what you're going to do is you're going to put that back, and then you're going to delete all that footage.
I think it's probably going to be
Templar. I think it's going to be Templar. But which
I think so
easily
too.
leads into, like, yeah. I'm 100% convinced that the Templars would, because it would make it would listen, as much as I kind of take jabs at the Templars throughout history for like some of their actions. If anyone's going to be resourceful enough to flee being ended by the French, it's going to be the Templars.
It would also explain the Iroquois stories of giants who were clad in stone
Yeah.
and came from the south. If there were Templars who went to Oak Island, dropped off the treasure, and then proceeded down the coast of the Americas, Templars on horseback, that's giants in stone skin.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's definitive, and I'm not saying I have a lot of evidence for it. I'm just saying that the mythology, both the European and the Native American here, contains suggestions that are worth looking into, in my opinion.
It's the same
But
as it's the same as the Amphileif Moor. There's enough people that like see the same or don't hear the same thing. There's something going on that mountain. Let's have a look, see if there's any more. We'll take a couple more and then we'll head off. I'm familiar with the story. Oh, that's Late by Cal. Yeah, I'm familiar with the story, but it's very possible that it is Soviet propaganda. Yeah, the Soviets, but the Soviets, to my knowledge, the Soviets lose quite badly to whatever they find in that lake, so it wouldn't be the best propaganda. Oh, talking about the dogmen, Smoke Bit Fairy Tales again, like the Japanese Tengu bird people, they were often just bandits with elaborate masks. Yeah.
makes sense.
Even in the modern world, the bear is likely euphemism for bear because you were meant to avoid saying it unnecessarily. Yeah, that makes sense. And then cargo cults are a thing. So misidentification isn't hard to imagine. Yeah, no, there's actually a cargo cult based around Prince Philip. Rest in peace. There's a cargo cult based around Prince Philip, the late Prince Philip.
Cult?
Have you not heard of cargo cults before?
No.
So in World War II, when the American GIs were like island hopping, they would often land on the islands. There's a couple of them where they'd like speak to the locals, and as when Europeans meet local populations, they exercised, shall we say, for YouTube guidelines. Wait, as Wendigo does it, they kiffed. To get around the guidelines. They gave them food, chocolate, all that, like all these modern commodities, and they had them on big cargo containers with all the military supplies that would be left behind. And so the term cargo cult became like, there's one cargo cult that worships one specific American GI.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Like his name was like, it was something really mundane, like Jerry or something, and they like someone in the chat will like know the name, but they fully believe that one day he'll come back and bring all of the Western stuff with them. So sadly, some of these islands would have been irradiated by French nuclear tests. But my favorite cargo cult is the one that they have like a picture of Prince Philip, like just on the wall, and they believe that Prince Philip is like their deity, which is hilarious because he used to actually go back and visit them because he had to, because they was like, yeah, no, you've kind of messed up. They think you're a god. You kind of have to go back, otherwise they're gonna start thinking the world's gonna end. And I don't know what they're doing now because he is very much not with us anymore. Rest in peace. But yeah, it's a similar story. There's
Yes, peace. Rest in peace.
We're not going to get into that. We have very different opinions on the monarchy. We don't do politics on here.
We fought a war to get rid of you.
Yeah. Well, kind of technically not the same monarchy. It's rebranded since then. Although a controversial opinion, I would much rather we had a Stuart on the throne. But yes,
I've been watching. Have you watched the show Outlander?
I haven't. It's not my.
I've been watching it with my girlfriend, and listen, I do not know how historically accurate it is. It is It is 200 years beyond when my purview ends.
Doesn't he start in the American Revolution? Like he's a soldier?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It starts with the Rising 45.
Oh, I'm thinking of a completely different show where he comes back from the America. Okay. Never mind.
Yeah, it's this one's he's a Jacobite.
Okay.
It's the Jacobite. The Rising 45, Culloden Moore.
Yeah.
But if that's at all accurate to how Charles was, you guys lucked out.
Well, Charles the First. As much as I hate, because when I was
I'm talking about Charles Stuart from 1745. Bonnie Prince Charles.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Bonnie Prince Charles probably wasn't the best king to have.
Yeah, weren't the first two King Charles both executed?
No,
one was executed and one was exiled.
Yeah, so Charles I kept having wars with France, and he kept abolishing Parliament, and then Parliament got upset. Then we have obviously Oliver Cromwell, and Oliver Cromwell's like, "Hey, I'm a Puritan. Puritans are oppressed, so we should have religious freedom. JK, we're gonna oppress you now. Also, Ireland, you're dead. Also, Scotland, you're dead. Also, no, he actually left Wales pretty much alone.
There was nothing left to do to us."
At that point, which is really fun.
At that point, we were all here. We had all run away here.
Yeah. Well, no. One of the things that Cromwell was very famous for doing, especially to the Irish, was sending them to American plantations as slaves.
Yeah.
And we sort of.
But the reason I was making the joke is that it was the Welsh all ran to Pennsylvania. Like William Penn settled here and was like, "Hey, this is going to be a colony for Welsh people," and we went, "Done."
Yeah, we're like, so we're coming. We've got the passports ready. What's
Get
also
us away from these psychopaths.
But what it leads me to my favourite part of the history of British Isles, when the Irish became strong allies with the surviving royalist remnant. People who want and not only that, I mean, obviously the Scottish supported the Stuarts because the
Hmm.
Stuarts was a Scottish house. Like
Hmm.
James the First of England was like James the Fifth of Scotland.
Yeah,
Um, it's just
I
that
think it.
now I
Yeah,
think
I think it
after
was
now
James the Fifth.
it's the in fact I believe that like all of the English kings since still have the Scottish
Mhm.
title as well. Um, but it's just
Also, the way Scotland became an English like territory is the funniest
what it was, yeah, it
of
was just
any place
yeah,
to ever become part of the British Empire.
yeah, they went
It is
bankrupt.
the absolute funniest
They
that they
tried to
tried to start a
they,
colony in the New World and failed so hard that they became a vassal state of another country
they were
entirely.
well they were
Like Wales and
already
Ireland at least had the decency to get properly conquered.
they were already I dare you to say that to a Scotsman. I know so many Scots people you're gonna get angry emails now, just like, how dare you say that about my free and proud land? I know Scottish people, they are a lot of most Scottish people actually have a very good sense of humour, I'm not gonna lie. They will make you think
That
they're going to kill
Braveheart
you.
speech was really great, but it simply did not stand up to the central banks.
And suddenly streams cut off. Um, okay, before we close out, because I said I'd take you for an hour, and it's been nearly
Yeah,
two.
it's okay.
I see why you said, hey, can you do this earlier? Because I know that we both going to talk a lot, and we're going to be
Yeah.
like here like till midnight. But closing statements. So yeah, I don't think it's a monolith. I do think there is definitely an extraterrestrial element to missing
Hmm.
411. But I also do understand your hypothesis that what we've probably got now would most likely just be scout ships, because if they were
Yeah.
going to do anything, we would have been completely invaded by now. And I would like to quickly add, even if we do have a first contact situation, and they're perfectly friendly aliens, we should nuke that from orbit. Like the amount of diseases that's going to carry, even if they're friendly,
I
like
don't think we should kill them. I think we should probably just be like, hey, let's maybe not land yet.
yeah, just like here's hazmat suits, wear these.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think, but I agree with you. It makes sense that it wouldn't be a monolith. Like I don't think there's one. I do like the feral people idea, and I do still much as I've made clear in my national park, because I've noticed a thing. All of the national parks around the world actually technically are under one organization. Technically, they're all part of the same thing. The national parks here, they're not actually under the same organization, but they collaborate, which
Yeah.
this is
I
a
figured
very
they would share
suspicious
ideas.
word. Um, but yeah, it's also is funny that a load of national parks in the UK is where like the Woodwoes, the Beast of Bodmin Moor, the Amphiolaeth Moor, a load of face sightings, all these weird mysterious stuff happens in national parks. So I do like the feral people side of stuff. And yeah, what would be your statements, and then we'll do where people can find you one last time.
I mean, the only closing statement I would have regarding Missing 411 is that it is at its core an incredible vector for studying American history,
Yeah,
as well as history around the world, because it gives you a reason to look into not just what a place looks like, but the story of that place. And that leads you down so many paths that, for me, yeah, the mystery and the unsolved and the spooky factor, that's always been very interesting. But more than anything, I have loved the fact that I get to research a new culture every week, a new geography, a new location. It's been an incredible way to study things, and unfortunately, it's quite tragic. But it's broadened my mind in a lot of ways. It's made me ask questions that I never would have asked before, and I'm just excited that I get to keep talking about it. And I hope that one day all the questions we're asking have answers, because I'm very interested to know.
like
And
who were the
if you want
eight
to keep up
people?
with,
Who were
yeah,
the eight
if
people
you
in the
want to keep up
mountains?
with those questions and the answers that I find, you can follow me over at the Lore Lodge. And if you want to watch me and the lads, and that will sometimes include Ryan, play video games, you can check me out at my channel Aidan Mattis, which is at the Aidan Mattis here on YouTube. And then there's the History Hut, the Weird Bible. I've got to get some more History Hut and Weird Bible content up, but I've been busy as all hell. So yeah, those are the places you can find me. And then I'm at the Aidan Mattis on most things.
Okay, guys. Also, very, very quickly before we go, will you start looking at other countries missing 411 style cases in the
You
future?
cut out for a second there. What'd you say?
Will you start looking at other countries missing 411 style
Yes.
cases in the future?
Yes,
Okay.
I will. I will. There's a couple of possibilities. One of which might be that I hire a consultant to do the stories for the other to put the notes together, and then I can just film them. Or I might give somebody license to be Lore Lodge Germany, Lore Lodge UK, Lore Lodge, so and so.
Interesting. There's a couple of
Yeah.
stories in Indonesia that look very interesting that I've seen.
Yeah.
But
So
to everyone watching, I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
I guess.
I also I've got to say before we end the stream, thank you for coming on, Aidan. That's a bit I forgot to say in the end. Right. Bye, guys. Bye.
Bye. Oh, all right.
Here we go.